In World War II, an Allied air attack was about to launch. The target was a village in Italy. But there was one terrible problem. The village had already been captured by Allied troops. The planes did not know. The soldiers in the village did not know what was coming, and the message to stop it was not sent by radio. It was tied to the leg of a pigeon. His name was G.I. Joe, and on one day in 1943, this small grey bird had to fly fast enough to stop the planes. Every giant event has its teacups, the tiny true stories hiding inside the enormous ones, and inside the huge story of World War II, this is one of the smallest. One pigeon, one message, one village, and about 20 minutes to get it right. In 1943, Allied forces were fighting their way through Italy. They had landed in Sicily, then they moved onto the mainland. Now they were pushing north through a country that was difficult to fight across. Italy was not a flat battlefield. It had mountains, rivers, old roads, small towns, and villages tucked into difficult places. Armies moved, aircraft waited for orders. Messages had to travel between people who were not always in the same place or seeing the same situation. And that was dangerous, because in a fast-moving battle, information can go out of date very quickly. A place that is enemy held in the morning might be captured by the afternoon. A target on a map might suddenly become a place full of friendly troops. And if the new information does not arrive in time, the old plan keeps moving. That is what happened near the village of Calvi Vecchia. On October 18, 1943, British troops captured the village earlier than expected. That should have been good news, but somewhere else the day's plan had not caught up. An Allied air attack had already been scheduled. Commanders believed German forces were still in or near the village, but now the situation had changed. The village was no longer simply a target. Allied soldiers were there, civilians were there, and the attack had to be cancelled before the planes took off. In a war filled with machines, that urgent job was given to a pigeon. That might sound strange now, but during World War II, homing pigeons were still useful. Radios could fail, wires could be cut, terrain could make communication difficult, and sometimes, when speed mattered, armies still used birds. A homing pigeon does not understand a battle. It does not know which army is which. It does not read maps. It does not make brave human decisions. But it has one remarkable skill. It tries to fly home. So humans turned that instinct into a message system. A tiny written note could be rolled up. It could be placed inside a small capsule. The capsule could be attached to the pigeon. Then the bird could be released. And if it made it back to its loft, the message made it back too. The US Army had a Pigeon Service during the war. G.I. Joe was one of its birds. His official identifier was Pigeon USA 43SC 6390, but history remembers him by the name G.I. Joe. On that October day in Italy, G.I. Joe was released with a message. The message had to stop the planned attack on Calvi Vecchia. Think about how small that moment was. A handler, a bird, a capsule, a scrap of information. And far away, aircraft were being prepared for a mission that no longer made sense. The drama was not that bombs were already falling. They were not. The drama was that the attack was close. Close enough that the message had to arrive immediately. Not later, not eventually, immediately. According to the main account, G.I. Joe flew about 20 miles in about 20 minutes. 20 miles, 20 minutes, across the Italian landscape, while the clock kept moving. At the airfield, the bombers were preparing to take off. At the village, British troops had already entered Calvi Vecchia, and between them was one tiny messenger, carrying the difference between a cancelled mission and a terrible mistake. Then G.I. Joe arrived, the message was received, the attack was stopped, and Calvi Vecchia was spared from a possible friendly fire disaster. Friendly fire is when people on the same side accidentally hurt each other, not because they mean to, but because they do not have the right information in time. It is one of the saddest risks in war. War is confusing. Plans move, orders move, troops move, and sometimes the truth arrives too late. In this story, it arrived just in time. The number of people saved is told differently in different accounts. The careful version is this: at least 100 Allied soldiers were spared from possible disaster. Civilians in the village were spared too. Some later accounts give a higher number, but this story does not need a bigger number to matter. Even the careful number is enough. Because this was not a victory that changed the whole course of World War II. It did not end the Italian campaign. it did not stop the war. But for the people in that village, it mattered completely, and that is what makes it a giants and teacups story. The giant event is World War II. The teacup is a bird with a message capsule on his leg. After the war, G.I. Joe was honoured for what happened that day. He received the PDSA Dickin Medal, a major British award for animals recognised for bravery or devotion to duty during military conflict. It is often described as the animal equivalent of the Victoria Cross. PDSA records say G.I. Joe received the medal at the Tower of London on November 4, 1946. It is an extraordinary image, a pigeon being honoured after a world war, not because he understood the danger, not because he knew he was saving people, but because he did the one thing he had been trained to do. He flew home. G.I. Joe later lived at the US Army's Churchill Loft in New Jersey. He lived there with other notable pigeons. Years later, in 1961, he died at the Detroit Zoological Gardens, but his story stayed alive, maybe because it makes the huge machinery of war feel suddenly human-sized. World War II is often remembered through maps, generals, ships, tanks, and aircraft, but history is also made of tiny turning points, a message delayed, a warning received, a plan changed, a village spared. On October 18, 1943, the difference between danger and safety may have been a small capsule, a trained instinct, and 20 minutes of flight. G.I. Joe did not stop the war. He did not know the size of the event he was inside, but inside one enormous war, his tiny journey mattered. A giant conflict, a village on a map, a message small enough to tie to a bird, and one pigeon who arrived in time. That was today's tiny true story inside an enormous event.